When I opened my eyes at 2:11 in the morning, the most feared man in the city was asleep beside my bed, and somehow, I was holding his hand. For several seconds, I thought exhaustion had finally turned into hallucination. Rain whispered against the narrow window of my staff bedroom. A small lamp glowed beside the bed, throwing warm light across the room and onto Vincent Callahan, who was folded into a wooden chair that looked painfully small beneath his 6-foot frame. His dark jacket hung over the back. His tie was loose. His white shirt sleeves were rolled to his forearms. I had worked in his house for 9 months, and I had never seen him look anything except perfectly controlled. Until then, his eyes were closed. His breathing was slow, without the cold attention that usually followed him into every room. He looked less like the man people lowered their voices around, and more like someone who had simply run out of reasons to stay awake. Then I looked down. My fingers were wrapped around his hand, not resting near it, not accidentally touching it, holding it. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I pulled away. Vincent's eyes opened instantly. 1 second asleep, the next completely alert. Maddie. Hearing my first name in his voice somehow made everything stranger. I pushed myself upright, and the room immediately tilted. Vincent leaned forward. His hand lifted toward me, then stopped several inches away, as if he had changed his mind about touching me without permission. Slowly. Why are you here? He studied my face. You do not remember? I hated questions that arrived carrying answers I apparently should have known. I searched backward through my memory. The downstairs hallway. Rain against the tall windows. The cleaning cart near the library. A silver tray in my hand. The clock showing something close to 10. After that, there was only darkness. I remember working. Vincent's expression tightened. You were barely standing. I looked down at myself. My maid uniform was gone. I wore gray sweatpants and an old University of Pennsylvania sweatshirt I kept folded in my dresser. Alarm must have crossed my face because Vincent answered before I asked. Mrs. Whitmore helped you change. She stayed until you were settled. Relief came quickly. Then another question replaced it. Where is she now? Vincent glanced toward the door. Sleeping, I assume. I looked at the chair again. And you? Not sleeping particularly well, apparently. How long have you been sitting there? He checked his watch. A little over 4 hours. I stared at him. 4 hours? Yes. In that chair. His eyes moved toward it as though he had only just noticed how uncomfortable it was. That seems to be the relevant chair. I almost laughed, but confusion won. Why? For the first time, Vincent Callahan did not have an immediate answer. He looked down at the hand I had been holding. I tried to leave. And you stopped me. Heat rushed into my face. I did what? You took my hand. I closed my eyes. Please tell me that is all I did. A faint expression touched his mouth. Not quite a smile. You also told me not to go. I wanted to disappear beneath the blanket. I am sorry. Do not apologize. I grabbed my employer and apparently gave him bedtime instructions. You were exhausted. His voice softened on the last word. I looked at him again. How did I get up here? Silence. Something shifted behind his eyes. I brought you. You walked me upstairs? No. My heartbeat changed. Vincent stood and reached for his jacket. You could not walk. I stared at him. Vincent. It was the first time I had ever used his first name. He stopped. What happened downstairs? Rain tapped steadily against the glass while he held my gaze. You collapsed. I swallowed. And you carried me? Yes. The answer was simple. The image was not. Vincent Callahan was a man who had assistants carry folders and drivers open doors. Yet somehow he had carried his maid through his own house and then sat beside her for 4 hours because she had asked him to stay. Why? I whispered. His fingers tightened around his jacket. For once, the man who always seemed to know exactly what everyone else should do looked uncertain about himself. That, Maddie, he said quietly, is the question I have been asking myself all night. 14 hours earlier, Vincent Callahan had been nothing more to me than the man whose coffee I knew better than I knew his moods. At 12:15 that afternoon, I carried a fresh cup into his study while 3 men in expensive suits stood around his desk, discussing numbers I had no reason to understand. Vincent did not look up when I entered. That was normal. In his world, people like me were supposed to move quietly enough to become part of the furniture. I set the coffee beside his right hand and noticed the lunch Mrs. Whitmore had delivered nearly 2 hours earlier. Untouched. Again. Anything else, Mr. Callahan? I asked. No. I should have left. Instead, I looked at the coffee, then the sandwich, then him. You know, coffee still does not count as lunch. The room went silent. One of the men actually stopped turning a page. Vincent slowly lifted his eyes. Excuse me. My common sense arrived several seconds too late. Nothing. That did not sound like nothing. It was an observation. About my lunch. About the absence of one. The man nearest the window suddenly became fascinated by the rain outside. Vincent leaned back in his chair. Do you usually monitor what I eat? Only when I am the person carrying the same untouched plate back to the kitchen. His expression remained unreadable. I prepared myself for Mrs. Whitmore to receive a very polite request to replace me. Instead, Vincent picked up half the sandwich. Satisfied. Deeply. Something almost resembling amusement moved through his eyes. I escaped before courage turned into unemployment. I was 27 years old, and losing that job was not an option. My mother's roof had needed repairs after the spring storms. Her property tax payment was due next month. My younger brother had finally started community college, and although nobody had asked me to help, family had never required an invitation. Every overtime hour mattered. Every extra shift became groceries, heating, tuition, or one less bill sitting unopened on my mother's kitchen table. So when another maid called because her daughter was sick, I volunteered for the evening shift before Mrs. Whitmore finished asking. Maddie, you started at 7 this morning. I know. You worked late yesterday. Also true. She folded her arms. Those are not arguments in your favor. I smiled. I can handle a few more hours. Mrs. Whitmore studied me with the particular disappointment of a woman who had managed the Callahan household for 21 years and considered stubborn employees a personal insult. Eat dinner. I will. That was an instruction. Then I definitely will. I did not. At 6:30, a delivery arrived early. At 7, the dining room needed resetting. At 8, rain began hammering the tall windows, and someone tracked water across the west hallway. By 9:15, most of the day staff had gone home. I was still moving. Fold towels. Replace glasses. Polish the side table outside the library. Keep going. The house seemed even larger at night. Marble floors reflected amber wall lights. The grandfather clock downstairs counted every quarter hour. Somewhere behind closed doors, Vincent was still working. At 9:40, I pushed my cleaning cart toward the library and realized I could hear my own heartbeat. Too fast. I stopped. Breathed. You are fine, I whispered. The words sounded convincing enough if I did not examine them. I drank the last cold inch of coffee from my travel mug and continued. 10 minutes later, Vincent stepped out of his study while I was wiping rainwater from the floor. His gaze moved from the towel in my hand to my face. You are still here. Excellent observation, Mr. Callahan. What time did you start? 7. His eyebrows drew together. This morning. That is generally when 7 comes first. He did not smile. Have you eaten? I straightened too quickly. The hallway shifted beneath my feet. I reached for the cleaning cart and missed the handle. Vincent took one step toward me. Maddie, I am fine. Even to me, the words sounded weak now. His expression changed. The distance disappeared from his eyes. No, he said quietly. You are practiced at pretending you are. I tried to answer, but the chandelier above him blurred into a circle of gold. The towel slipped from my fingers. The floor seemed to tilt. And the last thing I heard before everything went dark was Vincent saying my name like it suddenly mattered. The darkness did not last long enough to feel like sleep. Sound returned first. Rain against glass. The faint ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs. Then Vincent's voice, closer than I had ever heard it. Maddie, open your eyes. I did. His face was above mine, controlled but tense, and it took me several confused seconds to realize I was not on the floor. Vincent had caught me. One arm supported my shoulders while the other kept me steady. I am fine, I whispered automatically. His expression hardened. You just lost consciousness. We are retiring that sentence for tonight. I tried to sit up. The hallway immediately swayed. Do not move yet. You are giving orders again. Yes. At least you are honest. Something changed in his eyes, but concern returned before amusement could. Footsteps approached quickly. Mrs. Whitmore appeared from the stairwell, still wearing her house shoes beneath a dark cardigan. What happened? She collapsed, Vincent said. I got dizzy. Both of them looked at me. Fine. I collapsed. Mrs. Whitmore crouched beside me. When did you eat last? I avoided her eyes. Maddie, breakfast. Her mouth tightened. Vincent became completely still. Breakfast. I was busy. It is almost 10 at night. Thank you. I had lost track of the century. Mrs. Whitmore touched my forehead, then looked at Vincent. She needs rest, water, and something light to eat. If she feels worse or faints again, she needs medical attention. Agreed, he said. I pushed myself upright before either of them could stop me. I can walk upstairs. Vincent rose beside me. Show me. Gladly. I managed one step. On the second, my knees weakened and my hand caught his sleeve. He steadied me immediately. No smug expression. No comment. Somehow that made the embarrassment worse. Nobody says anything, I warned. Mrs. Whitmore folded her arms. Vincent looked down at me. I was not planning to. Your face was. My face rarely says anything. Tonight it is very talkative. Then, before I understood his intention, Vincent bent and lifted me carefully into his arms. Surprise stole every argument I had prepared. Mr. Callahan, you tried walking. I can try again. Tomorrow. Put me down. When we reach your room. I became painfully aware of the hallway around us. 2 members of the night staff stood near the kitchen entrance. A security employee stopped beside the stairs. Every pair of eyes followed us. Everyone is staring. Vincent did not slow. They will recover. You do realize what this looks like. That made him pause at the bottom of the staff staircase. His gaze lowered to mine. What does it look like? Like the man who owns this house is carrying his maid upstairs. His expression softened by a fraction. That is exactly what is happening. Tomorrow this entire house will be talking. Then tomorrow I will give them something more useful to do. I should have been irritated. Instead, exhaustion pulled a small laugh from me. Vincent looked almost surprised to hear it. He carried me the rest of the way without another word. Mrs. Whitmore followed and helped me change into sweatpants and my old college sweatshirt while Vincent waited outside the closed door. She brought crackers, water, and strict instructions that I was finished working for the night. I gathered that. I murmured. 10 minutes later, she left to bring tea. Vincent appeared in the doorway but did not enter. How do you feel? Embarrassed. Physically. Better. He nodded. Then sleep. Still giving orders. A suggestion. Improvement. He almost smiled. Good night, Maddie. He turned away. My eyelids were already closing when something inside me tightened at the sound of his footsteps leaving. I did not understand it. I barely understood what I was saying. My hand reached toward him before my pride could stop it and found his fingers. Vincent froze. Please do not go, I whispered. The room became completely quiet. His hand stayed motionless inside mine for several seconds. Then I heard the soft scrape of the wooden chair being pulled toward my bed. Vincent sat down. He did not ask why. He did not tell me to let go. His fingers simply remained beneath mine as the rain whispered against the window. All right, Maddie, he said softly. I am here. For the next 4 hours, I slept while Vincent Callahan sat in a chair beside my bed with one hand caught in mine, and neither of us understood yet how much that quiet decision would change. Sleep came to me in pieces. Rain brushing the window, the low hum of the heater, Mrs. Whitmore opening the door sometime after midnight and whispering that she had left tea on the nightstand. Each time I drifted close enough to consciousness to hear the room, I felt the same steady warmth beneath my fingers. Vincent was still there. Once, I felt his hand shift as though he was preparing to stand. My fingers tightened automatically. He became completely still. His breathing changed, just slightly, as if 2 ordinary words spoken earlier had reached somewhere inside him that I could not see. I am here, he whispered. I fell asleep again. When I finally opened my eyes properly, the digital clock beside the bed read 2:11 in the morning. Vincent was asleep in the wooden chair, his head resting against the wall, his jacket hanging behind him. My hand was wrapped around his. That was the moment confusion became embarrassment. I released him quickly. His eyes opened immediately. Maddie. I pushed myself upright, asked why he was there, and watched him explain the missing hours one uncomfortable detail at a time. I had collapsed. He had caught me. He had carried me upstairs. Mrs. Whitmore had helped me change. Then Vincent had tried to leave, and apparently I had refused to release his hand. 4 hours, I said again, still unable to make the number sound reasonable. A little over. You could have woken me. You needed sleep. You could have called Mrs. Whitmore. She checked on you twice. You could have left anyway. Vincent looked at me for a long moment. Yes. That single word silenced me. He could have left. He simply had not. Why? I asked. His gaze moved toward the rain-dark window. I told you. I am still trying to answer that. You always have answers. Not always. That might be the most surprising thing I have learned tonight. A faint smile touched his face. Then he stood and reached for his jacket. You should rest. And you should sleep somewhere designed for a grown man. He looked at the chair. That would be an improvement. I hesitated. Vincent. He stopped. Using his first name while fully awake felt different. Intentional. Thank you. His expression softened. You are welcome. For catching me, I mean. And carrying me. And staying. You do not owe me gratitude for any of that. I know. I looked down at my hands. That is why I am giving it. Something quiet passed between us. He nodded once. Good night, Maddie. He opened the door just as Mrs. Whitmore appeared carrying fresh water and toast. Her eyes moved from Vincent to me, then to the chair beside my bed. She said nothing until his footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Then she entered and closed the door. Do not start, I said. I have not started anything. Your face has. She placed the tray beside me. Eat. I took a piece of toast. Was everyone watching when he carried me upstairs? Almost everyone. I covered my eyes. Wonderful. Maddie. Something in her voice made me lower my hands. Mrs. Whitmore glanced toward the door Vincent had just walked through. I have worked for that man for 21 years. I have watched him solve problems before people finish explaining them. Money, schedules, arrangements, whatever can be handled quickly. She paused. But staying is different. I frowned. What does that mean? It means Mr. Callahan knows how to fix things. He does not usually know how to sit beside something he cannot fix. The words followed me after she left. I lay back beneath the blanket and listened to the rain fading outside. Vincent had carried me because I could not walk. That part made sense. But nothing had required him to remain for 4 hours. Nothing except a request I barely remembered making. And somewhere between midnight and 2:11, the question had changed. I was no longer wondering why the most powerful man I knew had carried me upstairs. I was wondering what had made him stay. By breakfast, the entire house knew, although nobody was brave enough to say it directly to me. Conversation stopped when I entered the staff kitchen. 2 housekeepers became suddenly fascinated by a bowl of oranges. One of the security men looked at me, looked away, then smiled at absolutely nothing. I poured coffee and pretended not to notice. Mrs. Whitmore ruined that strategy by placing a new schedule beside my cup. I read it twice. 8 hours. 8 hours. I normally work 10. Yesterday you worked almost 15. Yesterday was unusual. Yesterday you collapsed. Fair point. Annoying point, but fair. I looked at the missing evening shifts. Put them back. Mrs. Whitmore calmly buttered a piece of toast. I cannot. I already knew why. I found Vincent in the breakfast room 10 minutes later, standing beside the windows with a cup of black coffee and an untouched plate. Apparently some habits survive dramatic evenings. I placed the schedule beside him. Good morning. His eyes moved from the paper to my face. How are you feeling? Like someone shortened my work week without asking. Then you are feeling argumentative. That is encouraging. Vincent. His expression changed slightly at his first name. You need rest. I need hours. Your paycheck will remain the same. I stared at him. No. He set down his coffee. No. The word probably did not visit him often. I am not accepting money for hours I did not work. You have been covering additional shifts for months. Because I volunteered. And yesterday proved that system is not working. So hire another person. I already authorized it. That stopped me for half a second. Good. Then until they arrive, I work my regular schedule. 8 hours. 9. 8. 9. With an actual lunch break. Vincent studied me as if negotiating staff hours required more concentration than whatever happened behind the closed doors of his study. 8.5. 9. You are remarkably stubborn. You carried me upstairs. You knew that already. A faint smile appeared. 9. No double shifts. Unless I volunteer. No. I folded my arms. Vincent caught himself. I watched the realization move across his face. He exhaled. Would you agree not to take double shifts until we hire additional staff? That was different. Small, but different. Yes. His shoulders relaxed. Thank you. And no special pay. Maddie, my regular hourly rate. You are negotiating against your own financial interests. I am negotiating for my dignity. The smile disappeared. Not because he was angry. Because he understood I meant it. All right, he said. I picked up the schedule. One more thing. What? Vincent glanced toward my untouched coffee, then toward the dining table. Would you please eat breakfast before starting? I almost laughed. That sounded painful. It was. Yes, I will eat. By noon, I realized our conversation had changed more than my schedule. A stool appeared in the laundry room. The staff refrigerator was suddenly filled with sandwiches, fruit, yogurt, and bottled water. Mrs. Whitmore announced mandatory meal breaks for anyone working longer than 6 hours. Most importantly, the rule applied to everyone. Vincent had found a way to help without putting a spotlight over my head. I hated how much that mattered. For 2 days, things became strangely normal. Vincent asked instead of ordered when the question involved me. I stopped pretending coffee qualified as food. Once, I even saw him eating lunch before 3 in the afternoon. Then Thursday changed everything. I opened my staff locker after lunch and found a white envelope resting on my purse. My name was written across the front. Inside was an invoice from a roofing company near my mother's home. I recognized the address immediately. The repair total was $3,400. Beneath the amount were 2 words that made my stomach turn cold. Paid in full. I read them again, hoping somehow they would change. They did not. Vincent had learned to ask me about breakfast. Apparently, he had not yet learned to ask before entering the rest of my life. The $3,400 invoice stayed in my hand all the way to Vincent's study, and by the time I reached his door, gratitude was the last thing I felt. I knocked once and entered before he answered. Vincent sat behind his desk with Daniel Mercer, his attorney and closest advisor, reviewing a stack of documents. Both men looked up. I placed the invoice directly in front of Vincent. Explain this. Daniel glanced at the paper, then at Vincent. I believe I just remembered another appointment. Vincent gave him a look. You do not have another appointment. I do now. Daniel collected his folder and passed me with the wisdom of a man who understood when a room no longer needed him. The door closed. Vincent looked at the invoice. Your mother's roof needed repairs. I know what it needed. Then what exactly am I explaining? I stared at him. Why you paid for it? He leaned back slightly. You were taking extra shifts because your family needed money. The repair was the largest expense. Now it is handled. How did you know about it? Silence lasted half a second too long. I asked Mrs. Whitmore why you were working so much. And she gave you my mother's address? No. I found the contractor after I knew what the problem was. My fingers tightened around the invoice. You investigated my family. I solved a problem. There it was. The sentence that explained almost everything wrong between us. No, Vincent. You removed a bill. You created another problem. His eyes narrowed. Your mother has a repaired roof. And I have an employer who thinks caring about me gives him permission to enter my private life. He stood. That was not my intention. Intentions do not erase boundaries. The room went quiet. Rainwater traced thin lines down the tall windows behind him. $3,400 may be nothing to you. I continued. But it is not nothing to me. I was working those hours because I chose to help my family. You were working yourself into the ground. Then talk to me about that. Do not quietly take over. His jaw tightened. If I can fix something in 5 minutes that costs you months of exhaustion, why would I stand by and do nothing? Because it is my life. The words came out softer than my anger, and somehow that made them land harder. You carried me upstairs because I could not stand. I needed help in that moment. That does not mean you get to decide where I stand next. Vincent said nothing. For once, the man who could answer almost anything seemed to have reached the edge of his own language. I placed the invoice between us. I will repay you. That is unnecessary. I raised an eyebrow. He stopped. I watched him remember breakfast. Asking. Choice. All right, he said slowly. Let me try again. I waited. Would you be willing to repay the amount without interest, on whatever schedule you choose? Some of the anger left my chest. Yes. He nodded. Then that is what we will do. I turned toward the door. Maddie. I looked back. Vincent remained behind his desk, but the certainty had gone from his posture. What should I have done? It was not defensive. That surprised me. Asked. He looked down at the invoice. And if you had said no? Then you respect no. Even when I know I can help. Especially then. Silence again. Vincent finally nodded. I understand. No, you do not. His eyes lifted. But you were starting to. Something almost like embarrassment crossed his face, and I softened despite myself. For what it is worth, I said, Thank you for caring whether my mother has a safe roof. You are welcome. Never do anything like this again. A quiet laugh escaped him. Real laughter. Brief. Warm. Completely unlike the controlled man I knew. I smiled before I could stop myself. Then Vincent looked at me with an expression that made the room feel suddenly smaller. You are the first person in a very long time who has told me I was wrong and stayed long enough to explain why. My hand rested on the doorknob. Maybe everyone else was afraid you would not listen. Were you? I thought about it. At first. And now. I met his eyes. Now I think you might. I left the study with the invoice still in my hand, but one question followed me down the hallway. If Vincent Callahan was truly learning how to hear no, what would happen when he finally asked me something I wanted to say yes to? 3 nights after I told Vincent Callahan that helping someone required listening to them, I found him alone in the library learning that lesson from a memory he had spent years trying not to hear. It was Sunday, almost 11, and I was returning a stack of folded blankets to the second floor when his voice stopped me outside the half-open door. I know what day it is, Emily. Silence followed. I should have kept walking. Then Vincent spoke again, quieter. I remember every year. Another pause. Good night. I heard his phone touch the table. When I passed the doorway, he was standing beside the window with both hands resting on the sill. No jacket. No tie. No audience. Just a man staring into the darkness beyond the glass. He noticed me in the reflection. Maddie, I can come back. You do not have to. I stepped inside and placed the blankets on a chair. Was that your sister? He looked surprised. Yes. Is she all right? She is. His answer came automatically. I waited. Vincent glanced toward me. You are becoming very good at noticing when I avoid questions. Occupational hazard. The corner of his mouth moved, then disappeared. Today is the anniversary of my mother's death. The room suddenly felt quieter. I am sorry. He nodded once. I expected that to end the conversation. Instead, Vincent sat on the edge of the sofa and looked at his hands. She was sick for almost a year. Everyone knew how it would end except me, apparently. I sat in the armchair across from him. I did not ask for more. After a while, he continued. The night before she died, I had a meeting in Manhattan. I told myself it mattered. At that age, I thought important men proved themselves by never changing their schedules. His eyes stayed on the floor. Before I left, she asked me to stay. My chest tightened. Vincent's voice remained controlled, but his fingers had closed together. I told her I would be back in the morning. I understood before he finished. You did not get the morning. He shook his head. Rain began tapping softly against the library windows. The same sound that had filled my room that night. Suddenly, I remembered Vincent trying to move his hand and the strange stillness that followed when I tightened my fingers around his. Please do not go. That was why, I whispered. He looked at me. The night I collapsed. When I asked you to stay, Vincent said nothing for several seconds. That is why I sat down. My heartbeat slowed. But not why you stayed 4 hours. His eyes held mine. No. Then why? He leaned back, as though distance might make honesty easier. At first, I was remembering her. Then you woke for a few seconds and asked if I was still there. I did not remember that. What did you say? Yes. And then? You went back to sleep. A faint smile touched his face. 20 minutes later, you complained that the kitchen coffee tasted like disappointment. I covered my eyes. Please tell me I did not. You did. I am resigning tomorrow. That earned a quiet laugh. When I lowered my hands, he was still smiling. Not Vincent Callahan, the employer. Not the man whose name made rooms become careful. Just Vincent. After that, he said, I stopped thinking about my mother. The smile faded. I stayed because every time you woke, you checked whether I was still there. My throat tightened. You could have left. I know. But you did not. I did not want to. The silence between us changed. I stood because remaining seated suddenly felt too intimate. At the doorway, I looked back. Vincent, leaving that night does not mean you did not love your mother. His expression closed slightly. You cannot know that. No. But I know guilt can take one decision and make it pretend to be your entire character. He studied me. How do you know? I thought of my father, of hospital calls I had ignored because I was working, of apologies that had arrived too late. Because I have one of those memories too. Vincent did not ask me to explain. That mattered. I touched the door frame. Good night. Maddie. I turned. His voice was barely above the rain. You asked why I stayed. I waited. The memory made me sit down. His eyes met mine. You made me stay. For 3 days after Vincent told me why he had stayed, I caught myself measuring every conversation by what neither of us said. He did not mention the library again. Neither did I. But something had shifted between us, and pretending otherwise became harder each time our eyes met across a room. Then Wednesday morning, Mrs. Whitmore asked me to come to her office. A white envelope rested on her desk. If this is another paid invoice, I am going to need stronger coffee. She almost smiled. It is not. Inside was a recommendation letter. My name appeared at the top. Vincent's signature was at the bottom. I read it twice. Why do I need this? Mrs. Whitmore's expression softened. You should ask him. I found Vincent in his study 20 minutes later. He was standing beside the windows, reading a document. I placed the letter on his desk. Are you firing me? His head came up immediately. No. Then explain. He looked at the recommendation, then closed the folder in his hand. I realized something after Sunday. What? I can learn to ask instead of decide. I can respect your boundaries. But I am still your employer. I waited. Your paycheck comes from me. Your room is in my house. Your schedule exists because I approve it. His voice lowered. If there is something between us, I never want you wondering whether saying no to me could cost you any of those things. My breath caught. It was the first time either of us had named what had been growing between us. And what exactly is between us? Vincent held my gaze. Something I would like the chance to understand. He opened a drawer and removed a folder. Inside were several job listings. A housekeeping supervisor position at a hotel. An estate coordinator position 8 miles away. An administrative role with benefits and better hours. Daniel found these, he said quickly. Nobody has been contacted. No interviews have been arranged. No favors have been requested. Despite everything, I smiled. That explanation sounded rehearsed. It was good. Then I saw the resignation form beneath the listings, and my smile disappeared. You want me to leave? No. The word came fast. Honest. I want you to stay. Silence filled the study. That is why I cannot make staying easier than leaving. I looked at the form. For months, this job had meant stability. A paycheck. A room. A way to help my mother and brother. Now it meant something else too. Every time Vincent looked at me, I would wonder whether I was an employee first. Every time I disagreed with him, some small part of me would remember that he controlled the roof over my head. If I resign, I asked, what happens? Pain crossed his face before discipline covered it. You choose what happens. Would you ask me to stay? Vincent took one step toward me, then stopped several feet away. I want to, but wanting you here does not give me the right to make your decision harder. My eyes burned unexpectedly. I picked up the pen. Then I think I need to leave. He closed his eyes for one brief second. When they opened, he nodded. All right. No raise. No promise. No command. I signed my name. My final day would be Friday. When Friday came, Mrs. Whitmore hugged me beside the service entrance. Daniel wished me luck. My belongings fit into 2 cardboard boxes and 1 suitcase, which felt insulting after 9 months of calling the estate home. Vincent waited near the front steps. He did not offer to change my mind. He only handed me my final paycheck and another envelope containing copies of my employment records. Everything is there, he said. Thank you. I looked toward the gates, then back at him. You are really letting me go? His expression changed. No, Maddie. His voice was quiet. I am finally understanding that it was never mine to allow. That hurt more than if he had begged me to stay. I nodded and walked toward the waiting rideshare. At the gate, I looked back once. Vincent had not followed me. He stood exactly where I had left him. For a man who had spent his life solving problems by taking control, staying still was probably the hardest thing he had ever done. And as the car carried me away, I understood the lesson neither of us had expected to learn. Sometimes the clearest proof that someone wants you is not how tightly they hold on. It is whether they can open their hand and trust you to choose what happens next. 3 weeks after I left the Callahan estate, Vincent walked into the coffee shop where I was working part-time, and the first thing I noticed was everything he had chosen not to bring with him. No driver waited beside the door. No assistant followed with a phone and a schedule. No tailored jacket that made everyone around him straighten without understanding why. He wore a dark sweater beneath a simple coat, and for once, Vincent Callahan looked like a man entering a coffee shop because he wanted coffee. Then he saw me. I nearly poured steamed milk over my hand. Maddie, Vincent. He approached the counter and glanced at the menu. Black coffee, I asked. 1 cup. I smiled. Mrs. Whitmore finally succeeded? You did. That answer landed somewhere deeper than I wanted it to. I poured his coffee. He paid. Then he stepped aside instead of assuming I had time for him. Do you have a break today? In 12 minutes. He nodded. May I wait? May. One tiny word. Months earlier, Vincent would have told me he was waiting. Weeks earlier, he might have rearranged something before asking whether I wanted it rearranged. Now he stood in front of me and left the answer entirely in my hands. Yes, I said. You may. 12 minutes later, I joined him at a small table near the window. Outside, afternoon traffic moved beneath a pale winter sky. How is Mrs. Whitmore? I asked, complaining that nobody folds guest towels correctly. That means someone moved them 2 inches. 3, apparently. I laughed. And Daniel? Still convinced he is funnier than he is. So nothing has changed. Vincent looked at his coffee. Some things have. The laughter faded. How have you been? Good. I start Monday as an assistant manager at a boutique hotel downtown. His eyes lifted. You got the position? I did. Congratulations. That was all. No questions about who hired me. No offer to make a call. No suggestion that he could improve the salary. I noticed every absence. Thank you. Vincent turned the paper cup slowly between his hands. I missed you. My heartbeat stumbled. I missed you too. Hope crossed his face, but he did not reach for it too quickly. Missing someone does not automatically make everything simple, I said. I know. You really have changed. I am trying. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. Why are you here? I asked. Vincent took a slow breath. Because there is something I wanted to ask you after I was no longer responsible for your paycheck, your schedule, or the place you slept. I knew before he said it, but hearing him ask still mattered. Would you have dinner with me Friday night? He paused. You can say no. I smiled. I know. And nothing changes if you do. I know that too. He waited. No persuasion. No charming argument. No promise of some impossible restaurant. Just Vincent waiting for my choice. 7 o'clock, I said. Relief softened his face. 7. I will meet you there. He almost offered something, caught himself, and nodded. All right. My break was ending. I stood, but my eyes fell to his hand resting open on the table. Suddenly, I remembered rain against a narrow window. A wooden chair. My exhausted fingers closing around his without knowing why. That first night, my body had chosen before my mind could. This time, I was completely awake. I placed my hand over his. Vincent went still. He did not close his fingers. He waited even then. His eyes lifted to mine. Maddie, the first time I held your hand, I barely knew I was doing it. His voice softened. And this time, I curled my fingers around his. This time, I know exactly what I am doing. Only then did his hand close gently around mine. He had spent his life believing power meant making people stay. I had spent mine believing strength meant never needing anyone. We had both been wrong. Real love was not a debt, a rescue, or a command. It was an open hand, a free choice, and the quiet courage to come back when nobody had the power to make you.